The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericavariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak. Are you interested in marriage, divorce, midlife dating? Keep it tuned right here for the next hour as Jim and his guest explore some fascinating and important topics. Now, here's your host, Jim Duzak.
Hello, and welcome to Relationship Radio. I'm Jim Duzak. I'm a divorce lawyer and mediator, a columnist for ConnectionsForWomen.com and BoomerLiving.com, and the author of the book Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. At one time, I even owned a dating service. You can learn more about me if you'd like by visiting my website, www.attorneyatlove.com. Now, this is not a call-in show, but I do love to hear from listeners. So if you have a question, a comment, or a suggestion, please email me at jim@attorneyatlove.com. I'll do my best to get back to you the same day. As most of you know, today is Good Friday, one of the most sacred days on the Christian calendar. We're also in the middle of the 8-day Passover season, a very special time for those of the Jewish faith. I thought that this might be the ideal time to look at marriage and marriage counseling from a faith-based perspective. My guest today is Mitch Temple. Mitch is both an ordained minister and a licensed marriage and family therapist. He's also author of the book, The Marriage Turnaround, How Thinking Differently About Your Relationship Can Change Everything. Although the book has been out only a short time, it's already gotten quite a number of excellent reviews. I've read it myself, and I can tell you that whether you consider yourself a religious person or not, you'll enjoy this book, and you'll be inspired by it. Mitch, welcome to Relationship Radio.
Thank you, Jim. It's an honor to be with you.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time on a day when people in the ministry are probably extremely busy and you're probably getting ready to go to services, so I do appreciate it. I'd like to start by talking a bit about pastoral counseling in general. In doing research for my own book, I learned that when people have marital problems, they're more than twice as likely to go to their priests, ministers, or rabbis for help, rather than to go to what I call secular marriage counselors. Pastoral counseling is a huge phenomenon, isn't it?
It is, Jim. It's one that has really grown, I would say, more so in the last decade than ever before.
Mm-hmm. You know, I also learned when I was writing my book that there's a well-known writer by the name of Dr. Harville Hendricks. He has a book called Getting the Love You Want, and that book has sold literally millions of copies. Right. He actually started out as a pastoral counselor in the Baptist church, I believe.
Yes.
Not every pastoral counselor is a Harville Hendricks, but are more clergymen these days getting advanced training in psychology and related fields?
Absolutely. As churches have tended to really grow. I mean, in days gone by, most churches were smaller. Mm-hmm. And now most churches actually fall into the medium size range. And
you also have these mega churches now.
Exactly. You've got churches with 10 to 50 or 60,000 people. And because of that, I think that has led pastors to go back to their educational sources, whatever that may be, and try to qualify themselves to actually speak into this world. And also because that our culture has changed and problems have become more complex. There's more legal issues involved even in counseling today. And so churches have realized that not only just to provide the best service and care for their parishioners, but also from a legal protection standpoint, it's important for pastors and counselors, even religious counselors in general, to have the background and education that they need.
You yourself have graduate degrees in both religion and in marriage and family therapy, isn't that right?
That's correct. That's correct. And I started out, of course, in the religious field in full-time church work. And you know, being in that world, it's as you said earlier, most people, they trust their minister or their rabbi or their priest, and they already have that relationship there. And so it's very natural that when a problem arises, they go to them first.
Well, you know, one of the reasons why, you know, it seems obvious that people would do that, and yet I was at first a little bit surprised when I saw the statistics on how many people use their ministers and priests, but then it hit me that, well, of course, you know, not only is the relationship already in place, but these practitioners, if you want to call them practitioners, don't have to advertise. They don't have to take, you know, ads in the yellow pages, and they don't have to have fancy websites and so forth to attract their own parishioners. So they're sort of operating under the radar in terms of the average person in society.
That's exactly right, Jim. And as I said, that, you know, many of the problems today are more complex. And so that leads many, as it led me as a minister, it leads us often back to the educational process to make sure that we are able to help people, because most of us who are in the ministry, I mean, that's our first passion, is to make sure we help people, but make sure we help people well. And so many pastors are, you know, in their educational training already have some level of professional training and equipping, but many are going back. Many are going back to get the education that they need, and that's exactly what happened to me. I remember I was sitting in my office in a small church, and I received a phone call one day, and it was from a gentleman who was contemplating suicide. And I handled the situation.
That'll sober you up quick.
Oh my goodness! It really just, you know, it just really floored me. I just didn't know what to do. I think I handled it as best as I could, but you know, I will always wonder to this day, if I had handled it, if I'd had the education and training, could I have maybe helped him on a different level? And so that was the turning point for me, to go back and get the education and training that I need. And I tell people who work in churches and synagogues today, you know, make sure that you're qualified. Make sure that you're prepared for that unpredictable problem, but inevitable problem that you're going to have to deal with.
So in theory, anyway, the marital counseling that people get from their minister or priest or rabbi, for that matter, can be every bit as professional as what they could get from a non-religious counselor.
It certainly can, and there's actually a level of qualification or licensure, if you please, for pastoral counselors. Not every pastor or minister has that level, but there is one, and that's a question you can always ask. What type of education and training do you have when you go to see your clergyman?
Although for the average person, that's a pretty tough kind of question to ask. I mean, it sounds logical and almost obvious to when you and I are talking. Let's say, well, sure, you want to check the qualifications of the person, but especially if there's a pre-existing relationship,
right?
You know, you feel kind of awkward saying, "Well, gee, can I ask you about your education and training?" You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. Yeah, you certainly want to be careful, and if there's a level of trust there, then that question, it actually may be easier to ask that question.
Well.
And for some people and other people, it may be more of a, maybe more of a challenge and maybe more uncomfortable. But you're exactly right.
Well, that's right. Maybe they could phrase it more like, Pastor, you did a wonderful job when my mother was terminally ill, and the family really thanks you. But have you ever handled issues of alcoholism and drug abuse within a marriage or something?
Exactly, Jim. And frame it in the way that, I don't want to present something that you're not comfortable dealing with. So here's my problem. Can you help me? And if not, I know that you know someone who can. I think that's a great way to frame it, because it takes pressure off of both parties.
Yeah, that is a great idea. Now I'm speaking as an outsider here, but I just wonder whether, even for a highly trained and highly skilled pastoral counselor, can he or she truly be objective about marriage and open-minded about divorce? In other words, are most pastoral counselors so committed to the idea of marriage that they basically try to talk everyone out of divorce, even in cases like, as I was suggesting, drug abuse or domestic violence?
Well, I think most pastoral counselors, clergymen, priests, their first goal is to preserve the marriage if at all possible, to do everything in their power to try to save the marriage, to try to salvage the marriage. And even research shows that most of the marriages today who go through a divorce, a majority of those marriages, the research shows that they actually probably could have worked harder to save that marriage. And so a pastor's responsibility, first and foremost, is to do everything in their power to try to bring that marriage back together, if at all possible. Because that's the basic value of most major religions, that marriage is important, and we want to protect it. We want to do everything that we can to bring it together. However, most pastors understand that divorce in some situations is inevitable. But again, divorce research shows that a majority of the divorces that are occurring today occur because of incompatibility, not because of abuse or not because of addiction or ongoing conflict.
I agree with you 100%, and I've sometimes spoken myself as a former divorce lawyer who believes that 80% of divorces are unnecessary.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, those other 20% probably nobody could help.
Exactly, Jim. Because as you said, there's just circumstances often beyond our control. For example, in the case of addiction, you don't just think your way out of addiction. You don't just commit that I'm going to give this up. If it's an addiction like drugs or alcohol or even pornography today, is another issue that's really tearing marriages apart. It's something that needs professional assistance, and if that person is unwilling to get that professional help from a licensed counselor, psychologist, and therapist. And when you're dealing with addictions, typically it's better to go to someone who has a higher level degree, such as a psychologist. But there are many master's level counselors who specialize in that area, which is fine. But I'm simply saying it's a very complicated problem. And if a person is in a marriage where that person refuses to get help, then sometimes you have to actually utilize some tough love, where you have to say, okay, this is the way it's going to be. If you don't get help, then this is what's going to happen.
Beck, I assume that you were, for quite a few years, you had your own churches. Is that right? You were the minister at, I think your book said a number of churches throughout the South. Is that right?
That's correct. As you can tell from my accent, I am from the South.
That's right. And when you were acting in your role as the pastoral counselor, did you find that people would typically wait until the last possible moment when either the husband or the wife had basically one foot out the door already before they came to see you?
Yes, it's very similar to the medical field. Doctors, I have many friends that's in the medical field, and they say, people typically wait till they get sick, not preventative.
Right.
I mean, they don't usually think about the preventative side, and the same is true with marriage. Most of us wait till we get into problems. We get into a crisis, actually. Something blows up, something happens, an affair occurs, or we just reach a point where we just don't know what to do before we try to get the help. And what's interesting, Jim, is that often people come with a mindset that when you're talking about a marriage problem, in our culture we have this expectation that there's an answer, a quick answer for everything. If your food's cold, then put it in the microwave for a quick solution.
Right.
And
instant gratification.
Yeah, exactly. And if your oil needs change in 10 minutes or less, and sometimes we carry that over into our expectations about fixing a problem. But my experience has shown, and I think even research bears this out many times, and through many projects, through many research studies, that people don't get into problems. They don't get into a crisis overnight, and they don't get out of a crisis overnight. And so I say to people that are in a marriage crisis or heading in that direction, realize that it's going to take some time. It takes a level of commitment when you go to see a therapist or a pastoral counselor. It takes a level of commitment and a realization that, this is not going to be fixed overnight. And usually we're talking about months of help,
right.
Months of therapy.
Mitch, we've got to take a short break, but we'll be right back with more information and insights from our guest, Mitch Temple, author of The Marriage Turnaround. This is Relationship Radio, and I'm Jim Duzak.
Ask the experts. Call toll-free right now, 1-866-472-5787. And ask our All-Star team to answer your question. That's 1-866-472-5787.
Thank you for calling.
VoiceAmerica.com.
Hi, I'm Jim Duzak, host of Voice America's Relationship Radio. I'm the author of a book called Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. It's a book that deals not only with divorce, but with how to enhance your marriage and possibly avoid divorce. Every chapter of the book contains real-world information and advice on issues like sex, money, communication, in-law problems, and the temptation to have an affair. For those thinking of separating or filing for divorce, the book explains how to do it the right way. It also deals with the critical issues of life after divorce, including when to start dating again and how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. If you visit my website, www.attorneyatlove.com, you can read excerpts from all 17 chapters of the book. If you'd like to order the book, the site has direct links to Amazon.com and the other major online booksellers. And you can use the site to contact me. I'd love to hear from you.
The latest business information is made simple with the Voice America Business Network. The professionals in the business world bring you live talk radio shows featuring an array of business topics, strategies for building wealth, sales and marketing, stock trading, investing, and business technology. Voice America Business hosts are professionals in their fields and bring to the airwaves weekly business discussions that offer up-to-date information, advice, and education. The Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business talk. Want to have behind-the-scenes access to some of the greatest minds of today? On Shift in Action, we feature leading-edge innovators who are building a more conscious, sustainable, and healthy culture. Host Stephen Dinan offers live shows with evolutionary leaders such as Deepak Chopra, Van Jones, and others who are creating new paradigms for conscious living. You can keep your finger on the pulse of the latest frontier work with our weekly transmission of Inspired Wisdom on Shift in Action, broadcast live every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time, noon Eastern Time on Voice America.
Stimulating talk.
It gets those synapses in the brain firing really fast.
All the time. The #1 Internet talk station where your opinion counts. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak, an inside look at marriage, divorce, and midlife dating. Now, back to Jim Duzak.
Hello again. We're talking today with Mitch Temple, who is a pastoral counselor, marriage educator, and author of the book, The Marriage Turnaround, How Thinking Differently About Your Relationship Can Change Everything. Mitch is also the director of the marriage department at Focus on the Family, which is a major Christian organization based in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Mitch, I had heard about Focus on the Family, and I've heard about it for a long time, but I'm not 100% sure exactly what it is. It's not a church itself, is it, or the educational arm of a particular denomination?
No, it's non-denominational, Jim, and it's a nonprofit organization whose major purpose is actually, I think some people hear more about politics surrounding the organization through the media, but actually over 90% of what we do has to do with helping marriages and helping parents. I mean, that's our core objective, and over 90% of staff resources and our radio time, everything else that we do across the world, literally 24 hours a day, is designed to help marriages and to help parents.
I see. You know, when we were talking earlier about the training that some pastoral counselors get, some of them have advanced degrees and some of them don't, and so forth. It occurred to me that maybe one of the things, I'm not trying to make more work for you, but maybe one of the things that you would be uniquely qualified to do would be to lead workshops or seminars, like week-long things for pastors around the country who do not have advanced degrees, but who are working in the divorce field and who need some, to be brought up to date on certain concepts and when to refer a case out and and that kind of thing.
Exactly, Jim. And actually, I've been doing that for years.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, and just serving basically as a consultant to churches to basically do what you just said, to go into churches and to work with their lay ministry or their leadership, their staff, or their eldership, whatever the case may be, and to help them to know what to do, what to say, what not to say when a crisis occurs. And, of course, a majority of crisis that occurs in churches these days have to do within the marriage context. So we spend a lot of time just equipping people, and, again, as you said, helping them to understand when they're over their head, where their boundaries are, and then also how to effectively refer people to the right kind of people. One of the most important parts of counseling, the whole counseling business and success of counseling, is the ability to know when to refer and who to refer to. And so that's exactly what I do, and it's just really neat to go out and to do that, to equip people who have the passion to do it, but may simply not know how to do it.
Well, that's a great service. We were talking a little bit earlier about what a pastoral counselor actually does, the real nitty-gritty of it, and people come to your office, and I just wonder, I'm not a marriage counselor myself, and I've always been curious how some of these things work. I've been told by other marriage counselors that a lot of couples want the counselor to make the ultimate stay or go decision for them, or at least express his opinion as to whether the particular marriage is worth saving. Did you have to deal with those issues all the time? And if so, how did you deal with them?
Well, to answer your question, all the time. Yeah, because people often, many times, and I've been in that situation too, where my wife and I have gone to a counselor where we sought help from a mentor or a coach or counselor or whatever, and you do kind of have that mindset that, you know what, please tell me what to do. Well, a good counselor is trained to, and even a pastoral counselor is trained to present the truth to people, but then to allow people to make their own decisions, to help them to see both sides of the fence, to help them to see the consequences, both positive and negative, as to each decision that they may make, and then help them to make the best decision that they possibly can, but not to make that decision for them. That's a great question.
Well, it must be particularly difficult for a young pastor, particularly if he doesn't have an older and wiser one that's supervising him when he gets those kind of questions, because in a way it's very flattering, or it feels flattering.
Sure.
Here's somebody who thinks so much of my wisdom, and I'm only 26 years old, and they're asking me these things, and there's probably the temptation to feel that, well, if they're asking me to do it, then maybe I should do it. But
absolutely, Jim, and I think that is a temptation. I mean, it's what I call the God syndrome, where we kind of get to a point where we think that, okay, I do have all this experience, and people, it is flattering, and so I have the right to say yay or nay in this situation. But in most situations, we don't. I mean, there's a handful of situations where it's important to guide people in one direction or the other. But good therapy is about presenting the truth, presenting the facts, and then allowing people to make their own decisions.
I want to ask you one more question about the pastoral counseling, especially in smaller churches, before I go into your book. But we talked about mega churches before and all that, but as you were saying, most churches are small to medium-sized groups. In fact, the real core element of the church is, probably just a few dozen people that seem to participate in all the committees and all that stuff.
Right.
I just wondered, was it uncomfortable for you to be counseling people, who, let's say on a Tuesday night, you're talking to a couple about issues of alcoholism or infidelity in their marriage, and then on Wednesday morning, one of them is, at a committee meeting with you about the building fund, and did that present all kinds of problems for you in terms of, did you feel at times that you knew too much about these people?
Yes, Jim, and that is an issue, and that's where I think that's one of the biggest challenges of any kind of pastor or priest or any kind of clergy member. It's very, very difficult to be able to do that, and there have been many times because of that very dynamic of objectivity, of being so close to people that I knew I couldn't be objective. I felt that I had to be courageous enough to say to those people, look, I am flattered, I am honored that you've come to me for help, but here's the situation. I feel too close to you guys, and I don't feel that I can be completely objective, and therefore the best way that I can help you, I believe, in this particular situation, is to refer you to someone that is completely removed and completely objective in this situation. And then I would typically, Jim, offer to provide, spiritual, the spiritual dynamics or spiritual
reinforce
support.
What the other person is doing.
Exactly, and basically serve, kind of co-counseling, me dealing with the spiritual side and them dealing with, and I don't know how many times I did that, and it seemed to always work out well. And occasionally people would get offended because they have this relationship. And
they thought you were just sloughing them off to somebody else.
Exactly. But a majority of the cases, people appreciated that, and that type of scenario and relationship, and that type of professional mindset really worked well with most people in church settings.
That's great. I've been talking about your book, but not talking to you about your book, The Marriage Turnaround. One of the main points of your book is that there are so many misleading or false notions about marriage or myths about marriage that are widespread in our culture and that can actually lead to divorce. It's funny, this morning I was doing a few errands and I had some oldie station on the radio and I'm listening to that old Beatles song, Love Is All You Need. And I said, Mitch Temple should be listening to this because if there's a pervasive myth, and that's one of them. That if you just have love, every other problem will get resolved. Well, it depends on what you mean. If you mean the kind of love that you talk about in the book, maybe. But if it's the kind of romantic love that people have when they first get married, then maybe not.
Right.
But, I think one of those notions, though, that you talk about in your book is that conflict is bad. Now, why is that a false notion? A conflict doesn't sound like something that would be a good thing, does it?
Well, I don't think anybody signs up for conflict, for sure. I mean, most of us don't go into marriage even thinking that because that emotion is there and we are so dedicated to this person, we love this person, and the hormones are high, the passion's high, and all, the fireworks are going off, and we just can't imagine that there's ever going to be conflict. But the reality is there will be. You can't have two people in the same room together, even people that work together for very long. Even best friends are going to have conflict.
That's right.
It's just human nature. And so another scenario, Jim, that I found is that many of us come from either high conflict homes or homes that had absolutely no conflict at all. And so we kind of walk into marriage thinking that, we're not going to have any conflict. I'm not going to be a part of that whatsoever, and I never saw my parents have conflict, so we're not going to have conflict. And then reality hits. And so many people think, oh no, this is terrible, this is bad, it's over, because we're having a conflict here. But the reality is, conflict is a normal part of marriage, and I say that very cautiously because some people the habits they've gotten into and their mindset about conflict is very unhealthy. But healthy conflict is very normal, and it's also very productive. Healthy conflict can move you from a bad point in your life to a good point. It's just like pain in the body, Jim. If you're sleeping on your arm and it starts to hurt, what are you going to do?
Yep.
You're going to get up. You're going to roll off of it. You're going to move it,
right.
And so pain is an indication that something is wrong. You're cutting off the blood to your arm, and it's a very simplistic illustration, but the same is true in a marriage. If there's pain, if there's conflict, then it's an indication that something's wrong. So the objective is not to avoid that conflict, not to avoid the pain, but the objective should be to, let's learn how to deal with this properly. And the fact is, we can learn how to deal with conflict in a healthy way in marriage.
In another minute or so, we have to go to a break, but I'm reminded as you're talking about something that a marriage educator by the name of Diane Solly once said, that the number one predictor of divorce is not conflict, but the habitual avoidance of conflict.
Yes.
The type of situation where people tiptoe around the big problems and then pretend to ignore that elephant in the middle of the room.
That's exactly right, Jim. It's the same way with a medical condition. If your chest is hurting, and if you have pains running down your right or left arm, and you feel you feel nauseated. I mean, if you ignore those warning signs, then you're really asking for trouble more than
That's right. There's a doctor I know who used to say that the most dangerous words for your health are, maybe it will go away.
and boy, don't we all do that in our relationships? You know, maybe this will just blow over.
Ignore it long enough, and that's right, it'll solve itself.
But the fact is, that's usually not the case. We have to hit it head on, and we have to deal with it in the proper way.
Yep. Well, we've got to go to one more break, but we will be back in just about a minute and a half to speak some more with Mitch Temple, the author of The Marriage Turnaround, How Thinking Differently About Your Relationship Can Change Everything. This is Jim Duzak.
Talk, talk, talk. That's all we do is talk. If you'd like to talk, call us toll-free right now at 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. That's it. VoiceAmerica.com.
Hi, I'm Jim Duzak, host of Voice America's Relationship Radio. I'm the author of a book called Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. It's a book that deals not only with divorce, but with how to enhance your marriage and possibly avoid divorce. Every chapter of the book contains real-world information and advice on issues like sex, money, communication, in-law problems, and the temptation to have an affair. For those thinking of separating or filing for divorce, the book explains how to do it the right way. It also deals with the critical issues of life after divorce, including when to start dating again and how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. If you visit my website, www.attorneyatlove.com, you can read excerpts from all 17 chapters of the book. If you'd like to order the book, the site has direct links to Amazon.com and the other major online booksellers. And you can use the site to contact me. I'd love to hear from you.
Are you ready to grow your business? Listen for the Independent Business Owners Show with your coach, Rick Corrado. This entertaining talk radio program will bring you the tools to help increase your business. You'll learn sales success, time management, lead generation, business development, life balance, and much more. Rick Corrado is here to help you take your business to the next level. Listen for the Independent Business Owners Show, heard live every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific on the Voice America Business Network.
The biggest secret about men is that they are far more complicated than we often give them credit for. Join Dr. Chris Blazina as we discover more about the secret lives of men. This is an informative and positive program exploring the various facets of men's lives, from growing up to growing old. The Secret Lives of Men with Dr. Chris Blazina is broadcast live every Tuesday afternoon at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time on Voice America.
Streaming live, the leader in Internet talk radio, VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak, an inside look at marriage, divorce, and midlife dating. Now, back to Jim Duzak.
Hello again. We've been talking with Mitch Temple, who is a pastoral counselor, marriage educator, and author of the book, The Marriage Turnaround, How Thinking Differently About Your Relationship Can Change Everything. And we've been talking the last few minutes about the myth, and in some cases the destructive myth that people buy into about marriage. And I remember a quote from a great writer, I think it was Leo Tolstoy, who once said that what counts in making a happy marriage is not so much how compatible you are, but how you deal with incompatibilities. Now, Mitch, a lot of people buy into the myth, don't they, that a good marriage means they have to agree on everything, that they have to be perfectly compatible?
Yes. Oh, yes. That is a major myth in our culture today, Jim, and that kind of ties into kind of a cultural idea that we hear a lot about being soulmates. And the basic, let me say right off the bat that the basic concept of a soulmate, of being soulmates, is actually a very healthy concept. I mean, we all want to be soulmates. My wife and I have been married almost 27 years now, and we are soulmates. But when you hear that term being used in our culture today, it often refers to I think, kind of a mixed-up version of soulmates, and that is basically that there's only one person out there in the world for me, and I'm going to search for that person until I find them. And I know that I found this one person for me in all the universe because we're so compatible, because we're so much in love, we're so compatible, we get along so well. Well, the problem with that is after you marry this person, if that is your expectation, if that is your belief, if you believe that idea, that concept, then what happens when reality hits, when you realize that you're not compatible?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
You know, because most of us, the fact is most of us are not compatible on every single area in our relationship. My wife and I found that out the hard way. We thought, man, this is it. We're just both so compatible. But the fact is, when it comes to planning, for example, I like to have everything structured. I like to, if we're going on vacation, I like to have the itinerary, at 8 o'clock we're here, 10 o'clock we're here. And she is very opposite.
Approach, kind of.
Oh, my goodness. She just loves to show up and just, she just loves to see what happens and grab a book and sit down by a creek or on on a rock on a mountainside. And that's her idea of a vacation.
She's more in the moment.
We had some incredible conflicts over that, and there were some other parts of our personality that really just came out that really underlined the fact that we're two very different people. And one of the things that I try to help couples...
But you've been married now for, 25 years or so?
Yeah, almost 27, yeah. And what happened, Jim, is that we both learned that we're different but not wrong. I mean,
right.
Because we're different, that does not mean that we are doomed. In fact, all that means is that we have to learn how to manage those differences. And that's exactly what my wife and I have done, and we've spent our life trying to help other couples to actually learn how to appreciate the differences versus allowing those to become points of contention and resentment in a relationship.
One of the many things I liked about your book, Mitch, is that you really came across as a real person. You used examples from your own life and your own marriage to illustrate the points you were trying to make. And again, the book was not the autobiography of Mitch Temple, but there was a lot of times when the best example you could give of something was something from your own marriage, and you weren't afraid to show yourself not necessarily in a good light. There were things you said about yourself, especially from the early years of your marriage, that gave the distinct impression that you were a difficult person at that time. You were moody and irritable. And
absolutely, I didn't even like myself. I know Rhonda didn't. And but yeah, one of the things I deal with in the book, and which I see very prominent, and yet it's not talked about a lot in marriages today, and that is the issue of depression, Jim. I walked into marriage struggling with depression, didn't know what it was, but just a couple of years after getting into the marriage season, Rhonda realized that, boy, this is not the same person I married, and the deal was I was able to kind of cover some of that up. You can kind of suppress depression for a while and other types of emotional problems, but eventually they come out. And we had to deal with that, and we struggled with that. I mean, to the point where we both just wanted to walk out on our marriage, and we just didn't think that there was any answer to this solution. But then I got the help that I needed. I humbled myself, and it was a pride issue for me as a man and as a person in the ministry, as part of the clergy. I wasn't supposed to be this way.
Yeah, you're the one that they lean on.
Exactly. And so I had to just swallow my pride and get help. And man, after that happened, our marriage turned around completely. I mean, I was able to see things differently. I was able to see my wife differently, my children differently, everything. And part of that healing process was that Rhonda, though she's never been depressed a day in her life, Rhonda, my wife, she had to learn what I was going through. And the more she understood, the more she was able to accept and then actually help me instead of actually being part of the problem. And that's what we tell spouses when we talk to spouses across the country, is that if one of you is dealing with depression, it's both of your problems. I mean, it's something that you both have to learn to deal with. And if you both work together as a team, you can conquer this. It's one of the most common problems in our American culture today.
Oh, yeah.
And yet it's also one of the most easily addressed or one of the most successfully addressed issues as well. So, because it's there and because you live with somebody that's just moody constantly and just, maybe very high on the world on one day and just at the bottom of the pit on the next, if that's an ongoing issue, we all, it's natural to be depressed.
There's plenty of things to be depressed about these.
Oh, yeah. Finances, the financial situation today, I mean, it's a natural grief reaction. Anybody that loses anything, that goes through a grieving process, is going to go through through this stage of depression. But if depression becomes a way of life, if it's something that a person deals with on an ongoing basis, then it's
to get help. It's almost like the equivalent of an alcoholic who refuses to get help.
Exactly. It's absolutely
the question for the spouse is, am I going to be this person's wife or am I going to be this person's social worker?
Right.
And it's an unpaid social worker who's on call 24/7.
That's right. That's exactly.
That's a tough life. But I would think that somebody who has consciously struggled with problems of that nature in his or her marriage, and then has overcome those problems, is more likely to be an effective marriage counselor than someone who has supposedly always had an idyllic marriage.
Yes, Jim, and actually that experience of going through counseling actually led me to write this book, because what I had to learn in order to deal with depression is I had to learn how my thinking was negatively affecting my emotions. And because I was basically buying into these distorted thoughts or myths about myself, that, I was unworthy, that I could not do anything right, that I had to be liked by everybody, and when those things were not fulfilled, when they did come to pass, then the natural response was to get depressed. And so I had to learn through counseling and through education and through experience, I had to learn to reframe the way that I saw myself. And I had to replace those distorted thoughts, those distorted beliefs, with things that were more healthy, that were more accurate. And I said, you know what, if this works in my works in my physical life and emotional life, I wonder could it work in my relational? Well, I actually began to apply those same principles to my marriage, and it worked for me. And so I began applying those principles in working with other couples through the years, and it worked. And so basically the book is about how to understand, first of all, that what you think, what you believe, what your expectations are regarding your marriage or your spouse definitely affects your emotions, how you feel, and definitely affects how you behave toward each other.
Mm-hmm. And your wife Rhonda now is no longer just the minister's wife, but I understand that she works side by side with you at some of the workshops you do.
That's exactly right, Jim, and what a privilege and what a pleasure that is, because she's able to speak to people in ways that I can't. And she speaks from a completely lay standpoint, but you mentioned being real earlier. She's so real. I mean, she just opens her heart and says, guys, I've struggled with this, and this is how I dealt with it. And people, particularly women, come up to her and say, thank you so much for having the courage to say that, and to, and then to offer your what you've learned in life, your wisdom. Thank you for sharing that.
She had this talent in her all the time, and
she did.
That's great. Does she sometimes surprise you with the things that come out of her mouth?
She does. In fact, we were just in Singapore speaking at a Singapore government marriage conference, and sometimes we were both on the stage together, and sometimes I just back up, and I was just in awe at what was coming out of this woman. I mean, though we've been married 27 years, the wisdom that she had was just incredible, far more wise than myself, and more insightful and intuitive, and
such a rewarding thing to see. Just such a sense of it's almost like, it's just wonderful.
Oh man, we're Jim, we're at such a great time in our marriage. We're so thankful that we hung in there. We're so thankful that we kept working together, because we're at a point where we're doing these kind of things. We have our first grandbaby now, and we're just so thankful that we didn't throw in the towel, you know, and because, man, we're just enjoying our lives together. And
it's
it's
really,
not,
yeah, you talked about
perfect.
that in your book, taking these drives around Colorado Springs.
Oh, man, that's
Can I ask you a question, Mitch?
That's...
We do have to go to another break in a second, but can you stay on for just a few more minutes into the last segment? I know I told you you'd be going off right now, but do you have a few more minutes? Because I just wanted to ask you one or two more questions if you have time.
Sure, Jim, I'd love to.
Okay, thank you. We'll be back in just a minute or two with one more segment of Relationship Radio. This is Jim Duzak.
Have you ever thought about having your own internet talk show? Well, if you said yes, then click About Us. Then click Be a Host to get more information. Or just call Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417.
Say that again?
480-294-6417. VoiceAmerica.com.
Hi, I'm Jim Duzak, host of Voice America's Relationship Radio. I'm the author of a book called Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. It's a book that deals not only with divorce, but with how to enhance your marriage and possibly avoid divorce. Every chapter of the book contains real-world information and advice on issues like sex, money, communication, in-law problems, and the temptation to have an affair. For those thinking of separating or filing for divorce, the book explains how to do it the right way. It also deals with the critical issues of life after divorce, including when to start dating again and how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. If you visit my website, www.attorneyatlove.com, you can read excerpts from all 17 chapters of the book. If you'd like to order the book, the site has direct links to Amazon.com and the other major online booksellers. And you can use the site to contact me. I'd love to hear from you.
Total career success. What does it mean to you? Voice America presents a radio program dedicated to help you achieve your career goal. Even in times of economic uncertainty, you can achieve your financial goals. Whether you're a college grad, new in the working environment, or a top-level executive, you will benefit from the practical and proven advice on job search and career advancement. Join Ken and Cheryl Dawson every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern for Total Career Success on Voice America.
Wake up with a unique daily show. Listen for Mitchell John in the morning. Mitchell will bring you news, sports, and stock news from yesterday. You'll hear interviews from high-profile figures from the world of sports, entertainment, politics, and authors. Mitchell will talk to people throughout America. This is a show that throws right down the center. It's fun, information, and yes, even a little bit of music. Catch Mitchell John in the morning at 6 a.m. Pacific Time, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on Voice America, and Thursdays on the Voice America Business Network.
The Internet's #1 talk station. #1 talk station. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak, an inside look at marriage, divorce, and midlife dating. Now, back to Jim Duzak.
We've been speaking with author and pastoral counselor Mitch Temple, and I wanted to mention, I've said the name of Mitch's book several times, The Marriage Turnaround, but Mitch also has a couple of websites that I think you'd like to know about. One is called themarriageturnaround.com, and the other one is MitchTempleOnline.com, MitchTempleOnline.com. Mitch, I wanted to ask you something that you ended your book with this story and this little set of words of wisdom, and maybe you can end our conversation today with this. You talked about in your book about back when you were a pastor down in Florida, I think, a guy you knew who was a driver for the local 7-Up soda distributorship, and he got to be friendly with you. He delivered stuff to the church, and when he got married, he asked you to perform the ceremony, and you delivered a little homily, if I'm using that word right, at the wedding based on the idea of 7-Ups, and with 7 little messages that each had the word "up" in it. And rather than me trying to tell the listeners what it is, maybe I'll ask you to talk about them. I think the first one was "light up."
That's right, and we're not talking about Camels there, Jim. We're not talking about cigarettes. I just tried to take off on the fact. I asked myself, what kind of ceremony do I use here for this couple, and so I tried to use something that would be insightful, but also maybe a little bit humorous. And so I came up with 7 ups for a great marriage, and really these little tidbits are based on research and experience and just basic, timeless principles about what it takes to have a great marriage. And the first one I did start out with was light up, and by that I meant don't ever allow your marriage to get to a point that when one of you walks in the room that it's just like ho-hum, it's just, oh, there they are again. Make sure that you're glad that your face communicates, your body language communicates that I'm glad you're here. And you know what? We're not perfect. We're going to have some problems, and maybe we've just had a fight. But you know what? Mm-hmm. That doesn't take away from the fact that we should be thankful and delighted to see each other. And I think that's true when we come home from work, when we leave for work, light up. The second one is dress up. It's so easy to get sloppy in marriage, especially us guys. For heaven's sake, guys, let's buy some new underwear that we walk around in, or buy a new pair of pajamas, or ladies, put on some makeup. Just because we're comfortable with each other, that doesn't mean that we don't have a right to still be attractive or a responsibility, because that's important to passion, that's important to the sexual relationship. It's just important in general.
We all love being in our comfort zone, but the comfort zone does more harm than anything else that I can think of.
Absolutely. We just want to put things on cruise control, including the way that we look, and change those glasses that you've had for 50 years. It's time to get a new pair.
Change the haircut that you've had since the Carter administration.
That's right. That's right. And we all kind of get into those ruts, but it's important to change things up a little bit, bring some excitement back into the relationship in a healthy way. The third thing I recommended is stand up. Become each other's strongest supporter and advocate. Don't ever get into a habit of speaking negatively of each other to friends or families, and assume the best about each other. That's one of the definitions of love, is to think the best about the other person. The fourth thing is to start up. Start each day with the right kind of things, and sure, you're tired, but make sure that you send each other, that each other goes off to their work or their motherly duties or whatever the situation may be. Make sure you start the day right and start the day in a very positive way. Mm-hmm. And I think number 5 may be the most important, Jim, and that is shut up. Mm-hmm. It's important to be able to voice our opinions and to voice our concerns and voice our needs, but you know what? There's wisdom sometimes in just learning and just knowing when to be quiet.
That's right.
And that's something I think every successful couple understands at some point, that certainly you have a right to say something, but the question is, should you?
Somebody once said the secret to a happy marriage is to leave 2 or 3 thoughts a day unspoken.
That's right.
I think it's a good
that
idea.
Is such great wisdom, Jim, because in my own marriage and working with other couples, it's important to understand that. To learn that dance, when to say something and then when to step back and back away. You do have to choose your battles. It's like raising kids. You have to ask yourself, do I really want to fight this battle? Do I really want to put energy here, or maybe put energy into something that I know is going to be more productive? Mm-hmm. The sixth thing, the sixth suggestion that I give is pull up. When the other when the other spouse becomes discouraged, become their greatest cheerleader. Become a broker of hope in your marriage, because that's really one of our responsibilities, is to encourage each other. And if one of you comes home from work and the boss is just, giving you a terrible time, then just listen. Don't take the boss's side, but just listen, and then when appropriate, encourage them and encourage them that, we're going to get through this, and you don't have to go through this alone. I'm going to be here with you. Whatever it is, we're going to tackle this. We're going to face this alone. And then the 7th.
Last one, I think, is look up, right?
Yes, exactly. Boy, you've read this book well.
Oh, I love that book.
Yeah, I'm going to take you on tour with me. No, that's exactly right. The seventh one is look up. Don't depend on your own strength to make your marriage successful. Look to other people in your life, mentors, coaches, but also the spiritual part of marriage, the spiritual health that's within a marriage is very important. Even research shows that. And no matter what your beliefs may be or your background is, it's important for you to have something to believe in together. And again, research backs that up. It's so important. Go to church together. Go to a synagogue. Whatever. I think it's important for you to understand that, spirituality is very important in this relationship.
7-Ups. Well, Mitch, that is just great. And for all those listening today, you can read about the 7-Ups along with a lot of other things, marital myths, and a lot of great practical, real-world wisdom and advice if you read The Marriage Turnaround, how thinking differently about your relationship can change everything. And you can go to www.mitchtempleonline.com and learn more about Mitch. Mitch, I have to wrap up the show now, and I just want to tell the listeners briefly that next week's guest is Dr. Nancy Kalish who is the founder and director of Lost and Found Lovers, an organization that helps people who want to track down a lost love from the past. Should you or shouldn't you try to do that? Until then, have a great weekend. Thanks to Mitch Temple. And for all of you listening out there, spread some love around. I'm Jim Duzak. Bye for now.